immerse myself inside of my own lab. So with that being said, you basically use the iPhone, it uses the original commands, and then you see the small, cute little basically model that you now have to increase in size. Now, what I noticed as you're going to see it as well, is that if I were to basically stand outside of my lab and zoom it and increase it, it would have given me much better opportunities to actually properly superimpose it than when I was actually inside of it. And when I was inside of it, it wasn't able to basically allow me to emerge inside of it organically and naturally. As you can see, it was quite challenging for me to want to move it to a place where these small windows would actually properly register onto the proper windows that we have in my lab as well. So as I basically struggled and played around with it, what I figured is that, okay, I'm going to go and try to find the plane that this was and try to basically place it down there in that plane. And I found that at least manually with my fingers, it was quite challenging to be able to perform that. So what I did was they had this nice ability for you to be able to translate and rotate it. Basically using their original parts there, where you can say, okay, I need to rotate it this much, and this is basically how it is. You can rotate it in the Z direction or more or less, and this is and you have to understand that the Z direction, what direction that is, or the X and the Y direction, so you can rotate it. Of course, I didn't do a good job, so I reset that. And then you can increase in terms of the size of it and in terms of the scale of that. So as you increase it, it tries to understand what 1 meter is in reality. However, I believe even with the best of these aspects, you still would need some sort of reference system in order to be able to define the scale properly. Unless your iPhone or your smartphone or your module actually has depth measurement capabilities. And if it does have depth measurement capabilities, then it understands what 1 meter in reality is versus 1 meter in the digital world. And as you can see, you have the option to also play around and let's say increase or decrease the amount of lighting in particular areas, and so on and so forth. So again, let's go to the transformation. You can play around with the Z or with the X or the Y. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this. And then from that, you can basically move it down and up, left and right. And then in that situation, it basically goes down. Y goes up and down. Then you could move it a bit this way. Then again, you can go and rotate it, try your best. And then, of course, you have to scale it because this is not as large as it can be. So you go and you try to scale it. However, as you increase the scale, it still doesn't look like it is really increasing the scale in reality. Again, the case is that if depth capability existed, there would have been a much better opportunity. Because depth capability does not exist, you're going to have something like this. And what I realized is that if you have the model in your perspective, it would have a much better chance of looking at least more similar to your environment. So if you go and immerse the model inside of yourself and try to superimpose it as much as possible there, it is going to be looking a bit more like how you're wanting to basically look at it. And then basically here you can increase it in terms of the size and the scale to see how it's going to look. You can play around with your basically transformations. And then from that, you can play around and say, okay, how much that rotation is, and then take it from there. And there's a reason why I'm showing this to you, mostly because I basically ran this live, and you might think that the state of the art in these areas are basically completed. And I would like to basically draw your attention to the fact that that doesn't exist. Unfortunately, marketing and advertising has done much more damage, let's say, in terms of our perception of what really the state of research and the state of technologies actually are. This is the best that I can do after about 5-6 minutes of playing around with the software. I believe it was not at all intuitive to be able to perform that. What needed to happen is that you needed to have at least 3 reference points to be able to superimpose these together. And from that superimposition, you'd be able to immerse yourself in reality. Without that, the possibility of you wanting to play around with it and doing this would be quite challenging. However, it is interesting to also know that the software is probably one of the only ones that I could find that had the ability for you to even adjust it manually. Some other ones were quite a bit more challenging. Okay. So